Hey everyone, welcome back. You are listening to 한국어천재 on TBS EFM 101.3 in Seoul and the surrounding areas. You are hanging out with me, Kayla, and it's Monday, which means it is food talk time. But I can't do this alone. I'm here with Matt. Hi, Chef Matt.
Howdy, howdy.
Oh, it's so good to see you again.
I know. Mondays really are my favorite. And even though today's a temporary holiday, technically we're at work, but this doesn't really feel like work, does
Never
it?
feels like work. Honestly, I get so many lovely messages on my Instagram from all of our genies just kind of checking in on me over the weekend, being like, hey, DJ Kayla, y'all good? Everything's good, especially with the rain that we had and then this sudden sunshine. You guys, I don't even mind the heat today on this temporary holiday because it's blue skies and sunshine. I'm so happy.
It feels like we haven't had a day like this in weeks, and we kind of haven't.
No, I actually had checked in on this. Apparently, there had been something like 50-some days straight of like rainfall. So it didn't have to be consistently all day, but it was about 50-some consecutive days of having constant rain. And so the sun's out and I was so happy. It's wonderful here, but we are not weatherman here on Food Talk. we decided to cover food, and I was so excited for today's episode. Like, this is something I've been really looking forward to because we're all feeling a little taptape and like cabin feverish these days. You know what I mean?
Tell you what, I'm in the perfect mood for it right now. I'm planning this camping trip with some friends next week. Hopefully the weather we get today, hopefully that holds up. Right now we're checking the weather every day.
Yep.
It's like, it's going to rain. Nope, it's not going to rain. It's going to rain. So we shall see. But we are going to be traveling we're going to be going to Gangwon province. And, so that's about a 3-hour drive from where we are now.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the best parts about traveling around Korea is all the food that's around.
That's the thing. And this is something that Matt and I have been debating, talking with you guys about for a while now, haven't we? We've been like, I want to talk about this, but we have so much we need to cover. And that's talking about like all these different types of places you go, how to figure out what you want to eat when you're there, what's that place known for? Because each region has kind of got their own specific characteristics.
If you think about it, okay, so like really until kind of mass transportation in like the 19th century or so, before that kind of got up and running, it was really difficult to be able to travel from region to region in Korea, whether that just be on a personal level or that's, moving food from one end of the country to the other. So the different foods that you would eat in every region used to be a lot more distinct. Now, especially here in Seoul, if it's delicious, you can find it just about anywhere, but still, there's still certain places that are known for some foods, and they, no one does it better.
Okay, I have a question for you. And this, I'm kind of springing this on Matt here, so everyone forgive him if I'm just kind of throwing him for a loop. But do you have, no matter where it is in Korea, a specific favorite regional dish, like something that just sticks out in your mind? Because I have one. I'll give you time to think. My favorite here is when I believe I go to 전라북도. There is a dish there called 도리뱅뱅. 여러분 혹시 도리뱅뱅 아시나요? 도리뱅뱅 아시는 분? 아니 진짜로 제가 먹어봤던 한국 음식 중에 도리뱅뱅 제일 좋았는데 서울에서 아예 없어요. There's none in Seoul. I've yet to find it in Seoul.
So the listeners should know that she is being serious because this is about the 12th time she's told me this.
I talk about this
the
every
answer
day.
has never changed.
Never changed.
It's always this one.
You guys, like I literally will meet people for the first time and normally I get the top 3 questions, which is like, where are you from? Can you eat spicy food? What's your favorite Korean food? And I always look forward to the third question because I'm ready for it. And I was like, 좋아하는 음식 되게 많은데 아마 도리뱅뱅인 것 같아요. And they're like, what? What's that? And I'm like, that's right. I got this food on lock. It's so good. It's like deep fried, not even deep fried. It's like fried 빙어, like, and they put this 양념 sauce on it, and you eat it with 깻잎 and like 대파, and it's so good. If you guys ever go to like Muju or that like Jeonju area, it's delicious. I will forever love 도리뱅뱅.
And there's really nothing else like it. Within the whole Korean for one, eating 빙어 itself, which is a type of trout, isn't very common.
Yeah.
And then to fry it and then put it into a sauce, like this is a very unique technique. And there's really not much else like it.
Yeah, it's delicious, you guys. But that's the thing is like there are so many different regions that are known for different things here. And I feel like we'll try to break it down as simple as possible for you guys.
So I think for a lot of our overseas listeners, even though they might not be able to come to Korea now, this is a good episode for you guys to pay attention to. We're doing an overall kind of breakdown of Korea's regions.
Yeah.
And then in the subsequent weeks, we're going to be going to some specific regions. But right now, we want to give you guys an idea as to what the entire country looks like, the entire peninsula, not just the southern part. Just because I think you'll be surprised to see how many of our foods that we love and eat like on a daily basis here in the capital, they don't come from here.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, most of the dishes don't come from here.
That's true, actually, here. And so, like, I figured we'll kind of start north and work our way down.
Yes,
That's probably the best way to do it. So, starting in the north, tell us all about it, Matt.
Okay, so the north is cold, and like a lot of other countries where you have that kind of divide between the north and the south. You see this in Italy as well. A lot of other countries where that's where the kind of biggest contrast in food styles is, north and south. So the north, it's cold, it's mountainous, it's close to the China, so you see a lot more of that influence over there. And so when you're thinking about the northern regions as a general region, it's going to be milder. It's going to be less spicy. And it's a diverse use of grains just because it's a little harder to grow rice up there.
Oh.
And so think about what you would like in kind of like a hearty winter dish, right? Lots of kind of like fatty animal proteins, like a lot of kind of like mild foods that are like, carby and just comforting.
Oh, yeah. I think immediately of like mandu. I love a good mandu.
Mandu's a good one, yeah.
It just warms me from the inside out.
So mandu the Pyongan region is really well known for their mandu. And again, because of their proximity to China, that was something that was brought over from over there. And that's that influence that's coming in.
That makes sense.
And this is another area, this area too, it's also known for chol, which is a type of grain, millet.
Oh, okay.
So this is going to be a common theme our listeners are going to see throughout our exploration of the country. There are certain regions that are good for growing rice, and there are certain regions that aren't as good for growing rice. And chol is a really kind of unsung hero of Korean cuisine because it really does step in and take the place of rice in areas where it's hard to grow rice.
That's interesting. I don't know. Is there any kind of dishes here that we've probably eaten that has chol in it, or do you think?
Chapgokbap is the big one, right? So chapgokbap is a kind of like multi-grain rice. And there's no one kind of recipe for it. A lot of it will use things like, like chol, millet, like it'll use barley. And even you'll see modern interpretations now with things like quinoa and farro, non-Korean grains as well. But in terms of where you see it most often, you'll see it there. You'll see it in certain types of regional chuk as well. And then areas like Jeju-do, which also use a lot of millet because they can't grow rice there at all.
Oh, yeah, that's
you
right.
see it in makgeolli there a lot.
Ooh,
millet makgeolli. It's
I
delicious.
want to try that. I got to try that the next time we go. Right now, Arian, our guest for tomorrow, she is currently there taking her wedding photos.
Oh.
And I should mention to her to try that before
Absolutely.
she leaves. But so we've got the north here. Now, if we were going to shimmy on down to where we are now here in Seoul, this would be more of like the central mid-peninsula area.
Right. So when you're talking about central, Korea, you're talking about Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, Gangwon-do, like basically everything in that middle. And, if north is cold, then the middle, it's mild, relatively speaking.
That's true.
Seoul is an interesting one just because we don't grow a lot of stuff here in Seoul. There's not a lot of agriculture that's going on, especially nowadays. I mean, with your odd urban farm, notwithstanding. There are a couple of interesting things that we have lost over the years, though. Yeouido.
Oh, that's true.
The area of Yeouido, that used to be like a sandbar, before it got developed into an island. That's where they actually used to raise a lot of sheep and goat for food.
Wait, what?
And we don't really see that in our modern day diet anymore. But
I cannot picture a bunch of sheep roaming along
sheep and goat
Yeouido.
ranches on Yeouido.
Oh my gosh, that's great. You guys, for those of you who have never been here, Yeouido is like a humongous kind of business, corporate,
politics.
Politics. It's just hugely populated, industrialized place, and I'm just picturing sheep roaming across the area. Sorry, that's a great image there. But the things here, I guess, when it came to this area, there was a lot of influence probably from like royalty, though, right?
That's pretty much when you're talking about traditional soul food. You're talking about 궁중요리, the food from the royal courts. And we covered this before in previous episodes. The best way to look at it is this: food that's not spicy, mostly based off of soy sauce and meat and a variety of vegetables. So basically kind of think what fancy high-end food is in other countries. Again, doesn't have that kind of like down-homeness to it. It doesn't have that extreme spiciness. It's all just kind of refined
taste. Oh.
So 설렁탕, I think, is one of the best examples of this because it is, it's like milky white broth. It is somewhat refined because so much meat and bones go into it. If you think about this from, a long time ago before meat is, so common, this would have been a really expensive dish to make.
That's true, yeah. And now these days we just get to enjoy it with no thoughts kind of really given.
You have other dishes like chatjuk, which is kind of a hard one to find nowadays. It's a pine nut-based porridge, and if you've ever tried to buy pine nuts before, they are ludicrously expensive, even today. Like a little container this big, maybe about like 15,000, 20,000 won, like roughly about like $15 for a thing this big. Like I could eat it in like 2 or 3 handfuls.
And they're just like, well, there was my $15, $20 snack of pine nuts there. Now, we do have more regions we're going to get to here, but I thought it would be fun to kind of play a game here. A lot of our listeners really love 사투리. 사투리 here are the different dialects that are all around Korea. And the longer you live here, the more familiar you probably get with them and maybe can distinguish them. But I thought it would be fun to kind of test our listeners here before we move on into those different regions and give them a little 사투리 quiz here. So let's take a listen to this quiz.
다음 중 어서 오세요의 강원도 사투리를 고르시오. 1번 빨리 와요. 2번 퍼뜨고나. 3번 어여오래요. 4번 싸게 오쇼.
This is terrible with the AI voice.
We didn't get the UFO sound.
I know, and we also didn't get the boom noise. But because it's with an AI voice, it's hard to hear like the 억양 and the 말투 that goes into these here. But what it's asking is, out of the following 4, choose which one is from the 강원도 dialect there, that area out in Gangwon-do that you're going to be camping in,
That's
actually.
Right.
And it's for the term 어서 오세요, which is kind of like come on in
Come
here.
on in or welcome, but not so much like welcome. It's welcome. Come on in. It's much more friendly.
I feel like you need the hand with it, kind of like that. Welcome, come on in. How you doing? It's very welcoming. So the first one here, number 1, is 빨리 와요. 빨리 와요. So that one, we're not going to tell you the answer yet. We'll just read them off. So number 1, 빨리 와요. Now, what was number 2?
Number 2 is 퍼뜩 온나.
버뜩온나. 버뜩온나. And so that's number 2. Number 3, what was that?
어여오래요. 어여오래요. And just a reminder, we're looking for the Gangwon region 사투리 here. These are all different forms of 사투리, but specifically we're looking for the Gangwon region
Exactly.
사투리.
So
and then give us number 4.
4 is 싸게 오쇼. 싸게 오쇼. 싸게 오쇼. So it's so cute here. Now, I will give a slight humble brag. I'm very familiar with 2 of these 사투리s. One of them, I have many friends who are from the Gyeongsangdo province, so I'm very familiar with that one. And then I'm also very familiar with the 전라남도 kind of area because I love to go on vacation down that area.
I really like that we're giving our listeners the opportunity to kind of learn these 사투리 phrases because I think it's something that I really wish that would be embraced a little bit more here in Korea.
Yeah.
I think you've seen it in like the UK over the past 30 years, 40 years where they're embracing more of like the regional accents, less of the received pronunciation sort of thing. Hopefully we'll get to one day where like different regional dialects in Korea, would be something that could actually be a little bit recognizable outside of it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the dialects here in Korea are so they're noticeable once you can hear it. And of course you need to be familiar with Korean and Pyeongchuneo in general, but then once you hear it, you're like, oh, I know this. So every now and then you might be like, 기사님, when you're talking to a taxi driver, you're like, 고향 어디세요? And he'll be like, I'm from the 전라남도. And I'm like, I knew it. Now, for everyone here who's looking at these quizzes, one more time, we're looking for the Gangwon-do dialect. Number 1, 빨리 와요. 빨리 와요. Number 2 is 버뜩온나. 버뜩온나. Number 3 is 어여오래요. 어여오래요. And the last one is 싸게 오쇼. 싸게 오쇼. And so you're looking for the Gangwon-do. So let us know 1, 2, 3, or 4 here. Now, we'll give them some time to answer that. Yes. We'll give you a little time to think on it here. But what are we going into next? I feel like before we can even move on to a new region, we should talk about Gyeonggi as well.
Right. So the other two main kind of food areas of the central region of Seoul are Gyeonggi province and Gangwon province. Gyeonggi-do is the one that kind of envelops Seoul. So yeah, Seoul is like kind of like in like a little off center of Gyeonggi province. And again, similar climate, mild. It's got a coast to it. It's got this diverse use of grains. Lots of rice comes from this area. So this is an area where like all sorts of grain-based foods, everything from like traditional rice-based makgeolli to a lot of memir being eaten in this area too, buckwheat.
I love memir. You guys, my love of memir is almost as strong as my love of tori bengbeng.
It's really good. I mean, it's so floral, and and when it's turned into like a flower, it's got a really nice chew to it. Like one of my favorite things is like memir jeonbyung, the kind of like buckwheat crepes.
It's so good, you guys. They're so delicious here. So like that's kind of that Gyeonggi-do area because they do like you do have the coast on some areas over by Incheon as well, but then you can also do the Gyeonggi that's more inland as well. So it covers
that's
a
why
lot.
you have everything from like on the coastal side, you use a lot of jeokgal, which is kind of like fermented salted seafood, things like 새우젓, these tiny little brine shrimp that just add such a oomph to everything.
Yep. Don't make the mistake that I made, which was eating 새우젓 by itself. That's
an intense one. Yeah.
It was a salty shock in my system.
Yeah.
But what about things like when we go towards Gangwon-do? We've actually covered Gangwon-do a little bit.
Yeah,
but
there's
feel
so
like,
much to it though, right? I think when most people think Gangwon-do, right, they think of kind of like the simple hearty cuisine. And if I were to, like, gun to my head, if I could say, like, one thing that's really indicative of the Gangwon region is probably potatoes.
Of course, yeah.
I think that's the one that people will say, like, it's known for its potatoes.
감자전.
Things like 감자전,
Yep.
감자조림. And again, it kind of fits in with that larger image of this hearty cuisine. 닭갈비 is another one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, 닭갈비 over there is so good, you guys. You have to try it if you go. Now, I do want to get to our quiz here before we move on to our next region. So Kim Shiun here says, hi Kim Shiun, says, 두 번 버뜨곤나 이건 부산 사투리 같은데. That is correct. 딩동댕. 그거 부산 사투리예요. 맞죠? 버뜨곤나 is the Busan 사투리. And we were looking for 강원도 사투리.
Right. So this is from the Gyeongsang region.
Exactly.
Home to Busan.
So if you guys ever hear it, 경상북도, 경상남도, the 북 is northern part of 경상도 and the 남 is the southern part. So they kind of take that region and split it in half there to kind of make it simpler. What does that say there? 라꼬김? It says, 빨리 와요. 저는 충청도예요. 맞아요. 빨리 와요. That one is the 충청도 region. They're often kind of known for adding that you to everything there. Like, I will often hear like, 미안해요. I'll often text this way. I'm not going to lie. When I'm texting in Korean, I throw yous on a lot.
You know, the you might almost be like the y'all of kind of the Korean regional dialect. It's so emblematic of this region, and it has just like if you know what you're looking for, it has just that southern twang to it.
It does, and I will say for me, 충청도 is probably the easiest for me to understand. I think the 억양 is very similar to like a strong Minnesotan accent as well. When we're like, oh yeah, you know the kids are coming up there north.
It's got the little
Is that got the twang to it? So for me, I often hear that my 충청도 impression is very Minnesotan-y. Kim Shiun here says 1번은 충천 맞아요. 2번은 부산 맞아요. 4번은 전라남도? 오, 맞는데? 그러면 3번이 강원도인가요? 맞아요, 김시윤.
Nailed it. Nailed all of them.
금박수. That's right. So Shiun here got the answer. Number 1 is actually from the Chungcheongdo region. Number 2 is from the Gyeongsangdo region. He said Busan. Busan is in Gyeongsangdo. Number 4 is the Jeollado region. And so that's got a lot of that. I often hear a lot of aings as well in there. So when I go to Jeolla, I often go to Yeosu a lot. I've been to Yeosu like 6 times. And every time I go there, they're like, 맛있다잉. 이쁘다잉. Like a lot of this aings in there. It's really cute. I love Jeollado. And then that leaves number 3 being the Gangwon-do accent. That is correct. Way to go, Shiun. Now, we always tend to run out of time here, but I do want to cover just like, maybe we can take some time here to go to like the southern cuisines, if you have like a moment for that.
Sure. I think when you're talking about southern cuisine, right? If we're gonna blow through this, let's look at it in kind of like 3 different areas.
Yeah.
Because you have Jeollado, and then you have Gyeongsangdo, and both of them are southern, but they have very, very different feelings to them. Jeollado has much more of this kind of refined, traditional kind of feeling to it. And they're also home to a lot of rice growing regions. As opposed to Gyeongsangdo, which is it's much hardier, and it's what you kind of picture when you're imagining southern food from around the world. Like if I can compare this to anything, it's like Sicilian food in Italy. Lots of kind of like salty, punchy flavors, a lot of fermentation, a lot of seafood there, and then you have Jeju-do, which is unlike anything else in Korea.
It's so particular, you guys.
Yeah.
It's a world of its own in both language and food.
It really is. I mean, because it's an island, it's volcanic. They don't grow a lot of rice there. They have just their own style of cuisine. And I'm actually, if you probably put a couple of Jeju dishes in front of somebody who's never had Korean food or has very little familiarity with it, they might think that's from another country.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like there are certain things that when I go down to Jeju, and they're known for it too. Like I will say, if you go to like Udo is known for their peanuts.
Sure.
They're the tangkong there. You'll see a lot of peanut related food. What else would I say? Lots of the black pork. That's a big one. But yeah, it's because the very nature of the island itself is so different. It really limits in terms of what they're able to grow and produce.
But what they do grow and produce is so fantastic. I think one of my favorite fish ever is something that's very associated with Jeju. What do you think it is?
갈치.
It's not 갈치. I love
really?
갈치, but my favorite I think has to be okdom.
Really?
Yeah, it's so okdom is a type of sea bream, right?
Yeah.
So you have like other tom like tomi. It's kind of like a slightly fatty ocean fish, and what they do is they split it in half and then they salt it, so it's slightly dry, and it has just such this great meatiness to it, and it's fatty, and when you grill it, it just crisps up really beautifully.
Oh, it sounds amazing. I hope you guys have your mouth watering here because don't worry, starting next week, we're going to go in depth and try to cover these as best as we can. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
Always a pleasure.